My name is Steve Swinsberger from ANU, and I'm going to be talking about connecting Sakai and uPortal, but also about Basic LTI in general, which is a specification to connect tools together. You've probably heard a bit of talk about it in terms of hybrid mode and how Sakai OAE and CLE are going to be joined together here. So we're going to talk about where this originally came from. We'll talk a little bit about Basic LTI, and then two portlets that I've developed. One's called the Sakai Connector portlet, which is a pure Sakai connection portlet, and one is a Basic LTI portlet, which allows you to connect any Basic LTI tool into uPortal or some sort of portal environment. So originally started about 18 months ago. We were looking at bringing a portal online at ANU, and we wanted to link together some of the existing systems that we had, create a one-stop shop for services. People log into the portal, they can get their grades, they can see their courses, they can see announcements, news feeds, access all this stuff, rather than logging into all these disparate systems, bring them all together. We originally tried LiveRay, had a little bit of a bad experience, so we've built up a uPortal instance. And at the same time, IMS Basic LTI provider support was added to Sakai. So IMS is an organisation who you may have heard of SCORM, and they are creating a bunch of these connectivity specs. One of them is called Basic LTI. LTI stands for Learning Tools Interoperability. However, it's not just learning tools. So I don't know, maybe the name was coined before they actually fleshed it out. But it was originally designed for learning tools, but then people realised that, hey, we can add this support to really anything. We can add this stuff to a blog or a wiki or some sort of musical tool and allow this stuff to be embedded in other things. So the original work on Basic LTI, a lot of it was actually done by Chuck Severance, who was one of the original executive directors of Sakai Foundation. And so he added it to Sakai. I've worked on it as well. And allows you to render Sakai tools. One part of it allows you to render Sakai tools inside another environment. And it also allows you to pull external tools into Sakai. So Sakai CLE has it, Sakai OAE has it. It works in Sakai 2.6 onwards, possibly earlier. I don't think anyone's tried it yet. CSU tried it? For CLE? Do you know?
We use IMS packages in modules till that's it.
Yeah, okay. So I know it works in 2.6 because we use it and we're on 2.6. So maybe you might work in the early versions. And something that Ian actually mentioned yesterday was this is the original goal of Sakai, having this portability, pluggability, mash things up. And I wasn't aware of that until I actually read Chuck's book. So it's cool, we can actually finally achieve some of the original goals of the Sakai project. So Basic LTI. Has anyone done an integration between a learning management system and any other system?
Not personally.
Not personally. You know that they exist. Don't know words. So a lot of tools, a lot of these learning tools, they provide this API and they say you need to send a username and I don't know, some other bit of information and a timestamp and make an MD5 hash of it, and it's got to be all in this certain order, and send it along and we'll give you a bit of information back. And that was different for every single thing that you wanted to integrate with. So you had to recreate these custom integrations all the time. That is essentially what Basic LTI is designed to eliminate and to standardize. So it's a specially crafted request. It's just a normal post request. And the request is signed by a thing called OAuth, which basically hashes up all these parameters, adds a few extra ones in, and it uses this shared secret key system. So if your system wants to connect to my system, you have a key that identifies you, like maybe like a username or just the URL of your server, and then I give you a secret, which is just a password. And we hash these parameters against that secret, and stick the hash into, well, OAuth takes care of this, but it sticks the hash into the request. And on the other end, we take all the parameters out, rehash it with the secret that I've got, because it's a shared secret, so it should be the same. And if it all matches up, then we're good to go. Like I said, many external integrations use a similar approach. So the parameters, the secret, timestamp, checksum, some other parameters. But Basic LTI formalizes this. So we can do one implementation and we can connect to anything that supports Basic LTI because it's a spec. So there's two parts. First part is a provider, sometimes called a producer, and a consumer. Very easy to add consumer support, not so easy to add provider support, depending on how your application is created. So most LMSs these days, and so this has only happened in the past sort of 2 years or so, they're Basic LTI consumers. So Blackboard, Moodle, Sakai obviously, I think quite a few of the others. Most LMSs, I'd be surprised if there was an LMS that didn't support Basic LTI consuming, which means it can pull stuff in. Like I said, it's more difficult for an LMS to add Basic LTI provider support, because then they need to have an ability for a tool in themselves to be able to expose elsewhere. And they may not have been written to allow tools to be exposed as individual entities. They may need to be included in all of the markup that goes around them. Sakai is unique in that it is the only LMS that is both a provider and a consumer. I was actually speaking with Martin Dugalmas on Twitter, funnily enough, about Moodle supporting Basic LTI as a provider. It supports it as a consumer. There's an add-on that can be installed. And basically, I wasn't really interested in adding it as a provider. Why would you want to render a Moodle tool inside something else? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to be able to take the forum discussion from a Moodle course and stick it in the portal? Why do you want to have to force everyone to go to another place to get this information? So that's where Sakai, I think, excels, because we can actually pull these tools out, and what you're going to see in a moment is we can pull like the wiki tool out, stick it on a page. We can pull a resources tool out, stick it on the page right next to the wiki. They can be from two different courses, and you could actually be logged in as two different users. I'll show you the demo of that in a moment. So the original Basic LTI implementation in Sakai, it namespaced users and sites to keep them away from the general population. So you can see 5 users there: admin, Aaron, postmaster, Steve. So admin and postmaster are the default ones. I've added 2, Aaron and Steve. And then I made a connection request to Basic LTI, and it created this really stupid username. Now, no one's ever going to be able to remember that. So what I decided to do was add a little piece into this Basic LTI implementation, so that if you trust me, I can send you a username, and because we've established that trust previously, you will just use it. You won't need to create a new user for me. So I probably logged in with my own uni ID or something, and then it's created me this internal ID prefixed by the key, the Basic LTI key of my server. So I think I just put in my ANU as that. So very difficult for a user to remember that, to be able to log in to get that information. Plus also, they don't have a password. This is an account that exists purely for Basic LTI integrations. Like I said, not ideal for integrating systems that share information. So if you've been using, let's say, Sakai for 5 years, you have all these sites, you have all this data that you want to keep, and you want to actually now expose it somewhere else. The original implementation didn't allow you to do that. So we modified it to allow this clean pass-through. It skips the namespacing and uses that data that we send straight up. So, like I said, trust, and we can just use the username as is. To configure this, it's one additional property in your Sakai properties setting to turn that on. Now, in terms of the Sakai connector portal, which was the first one that I wrote, in order to firstly conform with the spec, Basic LTI spec, and also to make it more of a rich sort of experience for the user, I decided to add some information to the portlet retrieving it from Sakai via the SOAP web services. So Sakai's had SOAP-based web services for a while. They differ from the RESTful web services, which I was talking about yesterday, but they've been around for a while, they're quite robust, and allows you to call the APIs just via a SOAP request, which is just a bit of XML and a request. So some additional web services were written for this. I wanted to be able to get the list of sites a user has access to. I wanted to be able to get the lists of pages and tools in a given site. Now, if you log into Sakai, generally it's one tool per page, but if you can picture the home page of a site, you'll generally have 2 columns, so those are actual different tools. But what we're really interested in is you click on the wiki on the side, you get the wiki, 1 page per tool. So we want to get the list of all that information. Plus also, like I said, to conform to the spec of Basic LTI, generally user identifying information shouldn't be sent. So Sakai stores for every user an internal universally unique ID. So a web service was written to get that for a user. So instead of sending across Steve Swinsberg, I send across ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That whole long UID string. So the way it works is the user loads the portlet up, they configure it, it calls these web services because it knows who you are, and it presents a list of sites. You choose one, and then it goes off and says, all right, here's the tools in that site, you choose one, and then bam, you've got the tool. So I just covered this, but these are the additional web services that we added, the get user ID. So all of the SOAP web services in Sakai are authenticated, so you need to establish a session, you need to log in, there's a way to log in using the web services. Some of these actually need you to be logged in as the admin user. So this is all taken care of in the portlet. You just type in the admin username and password, and it will go off and do all the stuff for you. So 2 new web services, the get user ID, which returns that universally unique ID for a given username, and also get pages and tools for site. Now, SOAP 1, Access 1, only really returns strings. So in order for us to get this structure, I mean, I'd love for it to be able to return objects, but it can only really return strings. So we need to serialize that list of information into a bit of XML, and then later on we can just parse that XML and get back that structure that we had. 2 web services already existing, get session for user, so that will allow us to log in with an admin user and say, actually I want you to establish a session for Steve, and it will return that session. So then subsequent requests, we can actually use Steve's session to get the data. And then this one already existed, get sites user can access. And because you can see here, it only accepts a session, that's why we need this one, because we need to get a session for the actual user that we want, that we're interested in. So this is that structure I was talking about. As you can see, that would be really nice to have in an object, but like I said, with Access 1, you can only return strings. So XML really is just a big long string with a bunch of curly brackets in it. And we can take that, and there's some really neat Java libraries now that will deserialize that back into a list of objects. So back in territory I'm comfortable with working with objects, and we've got all our data that we need. So this is a screenshot of the edit mode of the portlet. Is anyone familiar with portals like uPortal or Liferay? Sakai's a portal, but you don't really have this edit mode. No one's familiar. Okay, so I'm sure you are. But basically, portlets have a bunch of different modes. So you have the view mode where you see stuff, and then in the toolbar, I'll show you this in a moment. In the toolbar, there's a few different modes that you can access. There's the edit mode, which generally is a place where you type in some information to configure that instance of the portlet. There's a help mode, which just shows a page, and you would generally put help information on there. I think there's an about mode as well, which gives some information about the portlet, like if you need to have any attributions to libraries you've used or copyright for for icons or something. And there's a new portlet mode called, which has just been added to uPortal version 3.2, which is called config mode, and that is an edit mode for the super user. So the the administrator, when they're adding this portlet to the system, they enter this config mode, which allows them to, it's kind of like this page, and it is a form, but allows us to configure the portlet with stuff that we don't want users to see. So it's like another edit mode. So that's where you put things like the username and password, the shared secret and key. It's all runtime configuration, so you don't need to adjust the portlet. You grab the WAR file, drop it in, and configure it. I'll show you the config mode in a moment, but this is the edit mode that the user would see. So they can type in the title, the height of the portlet, because this actually ends up rendering in an iframe. We can configure the height. They can choose a site, so this is a drop-down list of all the sites that I'm in. And then once I've chosen a site, it goes through and grabs a list of tools that we can choose from. So in the configuration for Sakai, you say, we want the resources tool to be exposed, the wiki tool, maybe the forums tool, but that's about it. And this portlet will respect that. So if you have 20 tools in your site, you'll only get those 3 if they're in that site. So all the configuration is shared. Now, I was asked yesterday that the technical presentations aren't technical enough. I hope that's technical enough. That is part of a basic LTI request. So the top bit is the URL that we're making the request to, and then there's a bunch of different parameters. You'll see about halfway down there's those ones that start with OAuth, and also LTI, LIS, that sort of stuff. So OAuth, once we sign our list of parameters, OAuth sticks all those in there. So if you can just ignore those for a moment. At the top, we've got context ID, so that is the site, and the basic LTI spec doesn't have many more parameters than this. So there's things like roles and first name, last name, things like that I haven't included in there. But there's not that many parameters that really need to go in here. They need to be named in a special way, so context underscore ID, and that identifies which site or which area of the system that you're accessing you should really be going to. So on the other side, on the provider side, it'll be pulling these parameters out and using them in the way it needs to use them. LTI message type, basic LTI launch request. That's generally not used by the endpoint, it's just identifying what the request is. We're sending along our email, we're sending along our name, LTI version. In case there's multiple versions and the spec changes, you could probably cater for that. Now, the consumer key is one of the important ones. That identifies who is making the request. Nonce is a number that's used only once, and that is an added security piece. In this case, it's actually, I think it's timestamped in nanoseconds or something ridiculous. So unless you get 2 requests happening at precisely the same nanosecond, then hopefully those nonces will be different. But on the other receiving end, it maintains a list of nonces. So if you try and grab this request and replay it, it'll say no, because you've already used that number. The signature is the hash of all the parameters. So like I said, there's a few parameters missing off this because I couldn't fit them on the slide. But once we send the list of parameters, OAuth will sign it and it will stick this signature in there. Signature method, HMAC SHA-1. So that is for the provider side. It knows how to pull these parameters out and rehash them, what algorithm to use. Timestamp, OAuth version, resource link ID. This is, I think according to the spec, it's just an identifier for the thing that's going to get the request. And then finally down the bottom, user ID. So this is, instead of that being Steve Swinsberg or my uni ID, that is the user ID that we received from Sakai. this probably isn't really a necessary step, but it's more of like really conforming to the spec, not sending personal identifying information. Even though I've got my name in there, but you know, uni IDs aren't really well known. It's more no one's going to be able to identify me from that. So this is what it looks like. This is a standard instance of uPortal with the banner and a bunch of tabs. This thing on the side where I can add portlets and change the page layout and add different tabs. But what you're really focused on is here, this portlet. And if you're familiar with Sakai, you'll see what it's in the middle of that, which is the resources tool from my workspace. And I've got a bunch of files. Now, I can go in there and add a file, and then if I was to go to Sakai, it would be there. Because I'm working on Sakai. This is a view into the Sakai tool. This is the Sakai tool. These little icons up here are the ones I was telling you about, like for the edit mode. Oh, there's a maximized mode as well, so you can get a full screen view. And then the X is to delete. So I'll be doing a demo of that right now. This is a screencast. Is it going to start automatically is the question? Yes, it is. I did this a while ago, so this is nothing's been skinned. Stock version of Sakai, stock version of uPortal. What we're doing here is going into resources, and we can see that we've got 2 files in there. What I didn't illustrate in this screencast was the actual process of logging out, so we don't need to be logged into Sakai to do this. But what is important is that in uPortal we're using the same user ID, so that's not a problem for us because we use the same user ID for everything. Haven't got anything on my page, so I'm just going to add the portlet to my page. It's already been configured with the URL to Sakai and the web server stuff. We get a message, not configured. So we click the icon that says configure, edit, sorry, and it flips to this edit view. So here we can type in portlet title. Now an administrator can lock all this stuff, so you don't, the only thing you can change is like the heights or whatever. So it's gone off and said, these are 3 sites you're in, workspace and 2 other sites. So I'm choosing my workspace, and then I've only allowed the resources tool and the profile. As you know, there are other tools in there like worksite setup, account, stuff like that. That's not coming through. We don't really need that to be exposed in uPortal. So here it is. It's made the request. We've got our resources tool sitting inside uPortal. We're going to add a file, just like we do in Sakai. We're going to add another file. So there we go, we've got 2 files. So we're working in Sakai at the moment, but we're inside uPortal. And if we refresh inside Sakai, we've got our 2 files there because we're actually in Sakai. So in terms of configuration, for Sakai properties, because we're using the web services, they obviously need to be turned on. They are IP restricted, so there are guides available on how to turn those on. That is insecure. That'll allow any person to be able to call our web services, so please don't use that. And we also need to turn on Basic LTI, so we enable the provider and we give them a list of Sakai tools. So in this case, we've got Sakai.resources, that's the tool ID, and also the wiki. And then these bits that are in red, the provider key and secret. And so that is for the Basic LTI provider to be able to say, when a provider comes through with this key, use this secret. And so we would give that secret to uPortal or wherever else that's making the request to Sakai, and everything will be sweet. Now this last one is the piece that I added, which is the highly trusted consumers. So if you set that, you can have a list of consumers that are highly trusted, and they won't get that namespacing that I was talking about before. In terms of uPortal, there's a config portlet mode. And so this is where the portlet administrator manages the configuration. So the user, we don't want the user to be able to see the key and secret. So that gets put in the config mode. The user never sees that. The first instance of this portlet had all this configuration in portlet XML, which is just like a web XML file. If you've ever seen those, it's a configuration file. So a user would have to download that, edit the file, stick it back into the WAR file, and put it into uPortal. That was a pain. So end up supporting config mode, which is just like a rich configuration. So you drop the portlet in, you start uPortal. Actually, I don't think you even need to restart. You can just drop it into a running instance. The portlet manager will see it, and you'll be able to go through and configure it with all the settings that you need through the config portlet mode. So hopefully you can see that. That's the config mode. So that's a little bit different to the edit mode, obviously. You've got quite a few more form fields to fill out. So you can set a default title at the top there, top left, and then you set the key and the secret. You set the endpoint that we want to connect to, so this will be our Sakai server. You give it the admin username and password. This doesn't have to be the admin username and password, but it does have to be an admin person. So we have a web service admin person with a super long secret that no one's going to hack. And then the web service URL. So because we need to do a login, we need to make a request to the Sakai login web service, and then the rest of the ones are in this thing called Sakai script. So we have two URLs we need to specify. And then the list of allowed tools. So they should link up with the tools that you set in Sakai. And on the right there, some friendly information to help people configure it. You get that for free. Now, the basic LTI portlet, this is the next generation of the Sakai portlet, Sakai connector portlet, sorry, and it's a pure basic LTI consumer. It can do everything that the Sakai connector portlet can do. And the way it's written is it's a bit of a pluggable architecture. I call them adapters. So we have an adapter for Sakai, we have an adapter for PeopleSoft, which we haven't finished yet, but we have an adapter for a thing called ChemVantage, which is an online chemistry tool, supports basic LTI. Also one for NoteFlight, which is an online musical notation tool, supports basic LTI. Wimba, which we've recently added, and then also a standard one. So these are additional adapters in case those endpoints, in case you can send extra information for them. This pre-processes that request, sticks a few extra parameters in there. At the moment, they don't do anything extra except for the Sakai and PeopleSoft one. So the ChemVantage, NoteFlight, and Wimba one actually just do the same as a standard request. They just allowed to pass through. But support's there in case they decide to add some more functionality. You can stick some more parameters into there to send them along. The basic LTI portlet itself registers as a portlet type. So when you are in uPortal, and I'll show you this, you can choose from the basic LTI type, and all this pre-configuration is done for you. Again, runtime configuration through that config mode form. So, a demo. Just make this a little bit smaller. Oh, what's going on? That is very odd. Where's the web style people? There we go. Yay. Okay, so I'm going to sign in. Now I'm not signed into Sakai at all. And I am in. Now I've already configured, let's make this a bit smaller. You see that all right? I've already configured this up as a Wimba portlet. This is the basic LTI portlet connecting to Wimba, but I'm just going to get rid of that. And we're going to go portlet manager, register a new portlet. We're going to choose a basic LTI type. So there's a few different types of portlets you can configure in uPortal. Don't need to worry about this too much. just going to give it a... So use all the defaults. Users won't actually see this. This is only for administrators, but what I'm doing is setting up a new instance of the portlet. And this thing down here, save and configure. So the portal's detected that we've got a config mode for this portlet, and we get this form that I was showing you before. So for the Sakai connector portlet, there were quite a few more fields. For the basic LTI one, because we're not using web services for Sakai, because we can connect to any endpoint, what we have is this thing called launch data. And these are any parameters that you might need to send along. One of them obviously is required, that's the endpoint URL that we're going to connect to. And this is the select little schema that I came up with. You know, some URL. And we can send along something like roles equals instructor. We would set up the key and secret. So depending on where we're connecting to, and we would set this type as well. So by setting this type here, that will allow it to pass through those different filters, those adapters that I was talking about. We would save that. That would come up as a port that we can drop onto our layout. I am going to cancel and add one that I've already configured for resources. And this should be familiar. There's my resources. So this is set up in our portal to automatically connect to the user's My Workspace. It didn't need any web services, we didn't need to configure it, didn't choose it, it's pre-configured. So I log in, I get mine, someone logs in, he gets his, anyone else logs in, they get theirs. And you can do all the same stuff that you could before. Okay, and another one that's pre-configured is the Wimber one. And it's a little slow because it's actually connected to the US. But again, this is sending across my information, my user information. It's saying, well, so this is where the adapters come into play, because the Wimber adapter requires a role attribute. Requires a role attribute, so we need to pre-process that set of parameters before we actually sign it. We need to stick in an extra parameter, send it along, and then Wimber says, I'm using a role, and you can go and do stuff. So, anyone not seen Wimber before? Everyone's seen, you haven't seen Wimber? Okay, so Wimber is there's a few different tools. One of them is like a live classroom tool. And so I've set up a room in here. I'm actually using Wimber. I'm inside the portal, but I'm using Wimber. And I'm just going to launch. And we have, if it does not, please click this link. We have Wimber. So Wimber now knows who I am, what role I am. I've done this all from the portal. I didn't have to go anywhere else. Likewise, I can stick the resources onto my page as well. I've just got a one-column layout because I knew it was going to be small. But I've got Wimber, I've got my resources. Let's stick another one on. Let's use the Sakai connector, which we've called the Alliance connector. Okay, so you saw this form. Everyone see that? You saw this form before. Let's go 800. Which site would I like to choose? Team. So we've allowed quite a few tools in this particular one. Let's go wiki. Okay. So we've got the wiki from my team's. This is all of our server configuration development information. It's probably a little bit too high, so I might just go in there and edit that. This is our UAT server, so it's not the fastest. Okay, that's probably all right. It's probably a little bit too big. We could deal with that later. Now we've got resources from my workspace, and we've got Wimber. So they're actually two different sites, obviously, the Java team and the my resources, and they're a completely different tool altogether, Wimber. So that is both the portlets and that is the implementation. So there's links there to the portlets. They've both been released to the JavaScript community, and I know as soon as we sort out the licensing stuff that they will be included in the next version of uPortal. Any questions or anyone want to see anything specific from the demo? Yeah, Sam.
I was just going to say, could this potentially be a way of implementing hybrid mode?
So I believe hybrid mode does some of this stuff. Where's David? He's hiding. Dave's going to be talking more about hybrid mode later, and I'll be chatting to him as well about joining in on that. But as far as I know, hybrid mode uses Basic LTI to render tools or render sites inside the library. Is that technical enough for you?
Steve, is anybody playing with non-basic LTI?
Non-basic LTI, so that would be full LTI. So full LTI is an extension which allows you to send data back and forth, so you can send a grade. So you could launch an external tool which then sends a grade back to the gradebook. There is work on implementing that. That spec hasn't actually been finished yet. I don't think the basic LTI spec's ever been finally finished yet, but it's to a point where it's done. So I think it's called Learning Outcomes. Do you know much about that one? So Chuck Severance has been working on that in Trunk, in Sakai, CLE. But I think it allows more of a rich communication. This is more like sending a launch, now you're over there. But full LTI will allow you to send a launch and then send some stuff back. You know, you finish that quiz, send the grade back to the gradebook, something like that.
I think it's due to be released in October.
Right, the full LTI, or is that the learning outcomes one? Okay, cool. Any more questions? No? Okay, thanks a lot everyone for coming along.